Hey guys, and welcome back to the official podcast of Develop Development, and this is episode 5, and in this episode we're going to be talking about conflict resolution. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, what do we talk about in Develop Development? Well, quite simply, we talk about everything from personal development, professional development, entrepreneurship, sales, conflict resolution, well-being, and we do it all taking into account personality theory, but we don't give you any personality tests. We don't limit you to any set amount of personalities. We don't put you in a box. We don't limit you. We just don't want to talk about anything from a one-size-fits-all perspective. We want to talk about your context, your situation, what are your values, what are your instincts, what are your goals, and taking into account those factors, we can help you with much more precision. And we do that both talking about personality types as well as engaging with you guys. If you guys have questions, if you guys want to share your context, then we can certainly have conversations with you guys. We do stream these podcasts live every week, every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Central Time. And they're also available to watch later. And today I'm with my sister, Itzel, and it's perfect and very fitting to be with her talking about this topic because we have very different personalities, very different instincts. And before we knew about this stuff, that caused some interesting challenges.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, we're siblings, and he's very, very outgoing. He's very much the type of person who likes to lead. He likes having a lot of friends. He likes working on projects and advancing. I'm more reserved. I'm more introverted. I like having space. I like having my independence. I like people not meddling in my life. And what did he do? He would meddle in my life, wanting to help me, wanting to support me with very, very good intentions, always caring about me a lot. But he would give me a lot of advice about what to do and how to do it, what not to do and how not to do it. And we would have conflicts over that. And he, on the other hand, wouldn't understand why I would spend so much time alone, why I would spend so much time in my room all the time.
Yeah, funny enough, before I knew about personality psychology, personality theory, before I knew about all these things, I had an instinct of sharing what worked for me and helping my sister get out of her shell. So I thought there was a problem.
Yeah.
I thought that she needed to have more friends. I thought she had to have a more active lifestyle. I thought there was something wrong with her. And yes, she had certain challenges. I mean, we all face different challenges, and we've both gone through our own personal development journeys. But there are some things that are challenges that we need to overcome in terms of insecurities, fears, anxieties that we need to work on. But then there are certain things that are part of our natural personality and that really are comforting for us, comfortable for us, an ideal level of stimulus for us. Because when we talk about personality types, what we talk about a lot in developed development is how different personalities have different ideal stimulus. Yeah. So extroverts, they are basically happier in an environment that has higher social stimulus, more physical movement, more constant change. Introverts tend to be happier in a lower social stimulus environment, more consistency, more organization. They like being able to predict things, plan things a little bit more. Now, in developed development, we talk about 6 different personality types, 2 extroverts, 2 ambiverts, and 2 introverts, to not make it too limiting. But if you want to simplify it, introvert, extrovert, and ambivert is a good way of approaching it. For those of you who haven't heard the word ambivert, it's that middle level personality in terms of energy levels, social energy specifically, not in terms of how much physical energy. Every type of personality has basically similar physical energy levels, but when it comes to social batteries, extroverts, they have much more social battery, and introverts, they have lower amount of social battery. So those are things we tend to explore, and not in a sense that extroverts can't do this or introverts can't do that. We just explore, okay, how do you recharge your battery? What environment? What type of activities? What type of environments? What type of stimulus? What things can you do to recharge your battery based on your mix of personalities? And sometimes we have a mix of personalities where within ourselves we have an extroverted side and an extroverted side, and we have to maybe stimulate the different sides that we have. So again, nothing is one size fits all. Nothing is about limiting you or putting you in a box. But really, it's just about talking, how can we become a better version of ourselves by having a more, what we say, regenerated state. What we mean by that is when we have a higher battery level, when we have a better emotional, mental, physical state of well-being, we're going to be kinder, more productive, more impactful, more collaborative. We're going to have fewer fights or less conflict, less drama in our lives, because a lot of the conflicts that we have in our lives stem from a combination of us being burned out and stressed, and as well as having our insecurities. In development, we talk a lot about how to recharge our batteries, but we also talk about how to overcome insecurities. In today's topic, we're going to talk about conflict resolution. And in the topic of conflict resolution, we have to talk about both those things. We have to talk about understanding our personality, how to recharge our personality. We have to understand the personality of the other person, how to recharge the other person's personality or mix of personalities, and we have to understand our insecurities so that we don't get overly defensive and don't let our ego and such get in the way, and also understand the insecurities of the other person so that we don't end up making them too defensive or too how shall I say, we don't want to increase the tension. And in terms of talking about conflict resolution, we admit that sometimes conflicts can be positive, sometimes they are necessary, sometimes by avoiding conflict too much, we don't innovate, we don't improve things, we don't optimize things. So sometimes having disagreements, sometimes having conflicts can be a good thing. So we're not trying to avoid them, we're trying to optimize them. Yes, we're trying to reduce the frequency of conflicts, but we're also trying to fix conflicts faster. And when we talk about fixing conflicts, what do we talk about?
Well, it's really a matter of how you handle the conflict, because many times when we get into conflicts, we get stressed, we get insecure, our gut buttons get pressed, and the instinct will be to fight. The instinct, well, fight or flight, really. It's either I run away and I avoid the whole thing, or I fight right now and I win this argument. And both of those are kind of the wrong way of handling things. You have to be looking at how do you resolve the issue that's behind that conflict. Because if the issue is that something needs to be optimized in terms of scheduling, name calling is not going to fix anything. It's just going to hurt things more. If the issue is that the other person has some other unrelated issue that you're not paying attention to, it's a matter of just listening to them and being like, hey, how are you? What's going on? So you have to look at what's the actual issue that's going on and how do you resolve that? Because then you can start avoiding future conflicts as well. You can avoid repeating the same pattern, and you can innovate, you can improve things, you can improve the relationships that you're in, you can improve the work dynamics if it's conflicts in the workplace, you can improve, you can even come up with great ideas and great solutions for problems that might help other people as well. So that's really something that we have to start focusing on. Solve the problem, not win the argument.
Yeah, because exactly, in the moment, if we have a conflict, exactly, there tends to be that fight or flight instinct, and neither is optimal because neither of them resolves the problem. We need to be able to take a step back, breathe, think about the situation, analyze the situation, express what we're feeling, what we want to resolve, but in a way that's not a personal attack, but rather a collaborative effort of, okay, so how do we resolve this together? How do we avoid this happening again? What's important to you? What's important to me? And how do we resolve it? And that requires a certain level of confidence. It requires also a certain level of mental clarity, which is why we talk a lot about being in a regenerated state so that we have more mental clarity to come up with better solutions. And we also talk about things such as timing. Timing are very important because sometimes we want to resolve the problem in the moment. And sometimes that's not the moment to resolve it. And sometimes we try to force it. And sometimes we mean well by trying to solve the problem in the moment. But sometimes the best thing to do in that moment is reduce intensity. Because intensity is also an issue we have to take into consideration. If there's too much intensity, it's hard to resolve things. So how can you resolve that intensity? Well, yes, if you can find a quick solution and such that sometimes can reduce intensity. But sometimes the best thing to do is in that moment, maybe admit that you're wrong, even though you might not be wrong, or invite the other person to an activity that might recharge the battery, that might distract them a little bit from the issue in that moment, and then get back to resolving the issue at a later time.
Yeah.
So each situation is different, each conflict is different, each one requires a unique approach, but we have definitely seen that, for example, in the business, many times we have conflicting ideas, different personalities. Someone is drained and insecure. Someone feels maybe a little bit excluded and needs a little bit of extra attention. And there are many different factors. And when those factors come into play, it can be a process of filtering all that out and being like, okay, now is not the moment to try to fix the issue because people are too defensive, people are too confrontational, people are not really focused on solving the problem right now. Maybe that it's just this person needs a little bit of extra attention. Maybe this person just needs a little bit of space to go out and move. Extroverts maybe need to get out of the office or out of the house and move around. Introverts, they might need to go to the room and recharge, read a book, watch some TV, lower stimulus. So sometimes it's a matter of just giving them that space for them to recharge the battery, and then maybe a few hours later, maybe a day later, maybe 2 days later, have a conversation.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so that thing that happened the other day, let's talk about it, not because I want to start the argument again, but let's see how can we optimize things so that you don't end up feeling that way, so that you don't end up feeling excluded, or that this frustration doesn't happen again. How can we solve this? So what are the issues that you're facing? What are the challenges you're facing? How can I help? If you come across with, I'm here to resolve things, I'm not going to get defensive. You have feedback for me. I'm not going to dismiss it instantly. I'm going to see, okay, how can I take that feedback and do something with it?
Yeah, no, and that's a very important thing. Like, listening to the other person when you're in a conflict with them can be hard, especially when you really feel like you're the one who's right and the other person's the one that didn't deliver or the one that didn't do what they were supposed to. But listening to the other person is the only way you're going to find out what's really happening. It's the only way you're going to find out how you can actually resolve this for the future. So exactly those questions of, hey, what's going on? How can I help? What can we do to avoid this happening in the future? How can we improve things for the future? Those are really good questions starting off. And also recognizing that sometimes it's just the wrong time to have an argument. Yeah. Like, if you're right before an important meeting, if somebody's right before a job interview, if somebody's right before some big event that they have to really have the clarity and the focus to deliver on, that's not the time to fight. That's the time to say, okay, look, we can talk about this later. Right now, go out there, rock it. I believe in you. Say the good things, point out the good things in that moment. Look, I trust you. Look, I believe in you. Look, I love you. Look, whatever. And then we'll talk about this later. Yeah,
and that's another important point. There's certain key words and phrases that can help reduce intensity in 2 seconds. And sure, sometimes it might not fix the problem at hand, but it can reduce the intensity and create a more open space for communication, for collaboration, for problem solving. And yes, exactly. Sometimes there's just bad timing, period, not just because people aren't ready to face things, but because they maybe have to do something very important, and distractions, it will be a distraction in that moment. And that's not to say that it's less important. It's not a competition of this important task right now and this problem. It's not a competition. It's knowing, okay, let's support this person during this very important moment, and then when this important moment finishes and everything's good, then we can have a calm, diplomatic, positive conversation, a constructive conversation. But if you're doing it in the heat of the moment, where there's a lot of stress, a lot of things going on. For example, here in the office, when we have to do these podcasts, every Wednesday we do 2 podcasts, one in English, one in Spanish. And we have to move cameras around. We have to make sure that the audio is right. We have to do a lot of things, and technology isn't always our friend when it comes to this. And it can be quite stressful during that period. So during those moments, we try to focus on the task at hand. Let's fix the problems with the technology right now. Let's get these programs on air. And then if someone has some feedback or has some thoughts or has some frustrations, then after the podcast's finished, we talk about, oh, okay, so this thing, maybe we can optimize this, maybe we can fix this. But in the heat of that moment, we try to kind of focus on the very important things, like, is the audio working? Are the cameras working? And sometimes it's a matter of a lot of troubleshooting, right?
Yeah.
And if you're trying to troubleshoot while also trying to fix every individual's insecurities and challenges, it can become a bit of a big task. So what we try to do is, okay, when there's better time, maybe we can sit down and optimize things, right?
Yeah.
So every episode we try to improve things because we try to get feedback. We try to listen to people and understand how to improve things. And this is just an example that we're trying to paint a picture of an chaotic environment trying to get something ready. But it can be anything. It can be an expo. It can be exams. It can be it can be a wedding or a childbirth. It can be, any type of big event that people are heavily anticipating, but they also might be insecure. They might be nervous. They might be stressed. And in those moments, people are going to get more defensive and insecure. Yeah. And they're going to get drained faster. And we have to also be a little bit more patient with people during those moments of high stress. Yeah. So we also have to have certain level of flexibility with the people around us. And the way to do that is by recharging our internal battery, working on our personal insecurities, to have the patience, to have the flexibility, to be able to put up with people in their suboptimal states during moments of high stress. That doesn't mean that we want to put up with constant abuse and conflict, but we have to understand that we all have our moments of insecurities. Yeah. We all have our moments of high stress. And in those moments, we want to be empathetic and we want to be supportive. Yeah. Because if we're empathetic and supportive, they get out of that high tension faster. If we become defensive or start fighting with them, then the tension increases and things get worse.
Yeah, and that's a big thing that happens a lot. You know, when we're going into a conflict, there's already tension. There's already some kind of stress or insecurities or some kind of issue involved, and we tend to press each other's buttons. The instinct is exactly to just drain each other more, make each other more stressed, more insecure, and that's a big thing. Like, you want to allow people learning curves. Yeah. If they're new at a job, or if it's a new relationship, if it's any kind of situation where there's some kind of change going on, you have to allow people certain learning curves in learning how to adjust to the situation. Yes. So you don't want to, first mistake, start reprimanding them and telling them how awful they are and how bad they are at what they needed to do. You want to support them. You want to be there for them. You want to sort of be an available space to listen to them if they have any issues. Give them advice if they want it and they need it, but don't force it down their throat. You know, you don't want to be telling people all the time, hey, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. You want to allow people to figure it out on their own. You know, it's a little bit like when people are learning a language or an instrument. Making mistakes is a very important part of the learning process, because they themselves then adjust and go, oh, wait, if I do this other way, it's better. And the same goes on in social situations. People kind of have to try things and see if it works. Yeah, I mean, in Develop Young, we talk a lot about this idea that failure, rejection, these are part of innovation. Yeah. I mean, and we have to understand that both when it comes to ourselves and for other people. We have to let ourselves fail. We have to let ourselves receive rejection, because that's an indicator that we are innovating, that we are stepping out of our comfort zone. We are trying new things. Yeah. We are learning new skill sets, because whether it's sales, whether it's in dating, whether it's presenting new ideas in front of our boardroom, let's say, when we receive certain level of rejection, or if we fail at something, it's an indicator that we have stepped out of our comfort zone and put ourselves in a vulnerable position. Yeah. And sure, if we're constantly failing and if we're constantly being rejected, maybe we're not learning from our failure and rejection, and we obviously want to learn from our failure and rejection. But in general, it's a good indicator. Yeah. It's a good indicator. I mean,
a lot of good things come out of failure. A lot of good things come out of rejection, as long as we don't make failure and rejection fatal, because we tend to make it fatal. And we have to understand the context of, okay, in our context, we want to step out of our comfort zone. We want to put ourselves in vulnerable situations. We want to face the challenges. We want to be okay with failure and rejection, and just learn from it and grow and develop skill sets. But we also want to let other people feel.
Yeah.
And that can be challenging, because when we're overprotective of people, we tend to want to wrap a bunch of padding around them and do everything we can so that they don't fail, so they don't have those.
Yeah, and also if we're very attached to the outcome of a project, that can be a very big thing. I know for me, more than wanting to protect people, because I am the kind of person that's very live and let live with people, but with projects, when I get really attached to, I want this to work, I want this to be good, I want this to reach a certain level of quality and success, it can be very easy to want to micromanage people and give them too much advice, like do it this way, do it that way, do this, don't do this. And people get overwhelmed with that. And they're not going to grow as much if we don't let them fail, if we don't let them have their own process.
That's an important point. Micromanaging is a great way to drain people, to make people feel insecure, to make people feel that they're incapable, and that makes them feel invalidated. And when people feel invalidated, there's more conflict.
Yeah.
And so we don't want to micromanage. We want to empower people. I mean, here in the office, we have a lot of different staff from many different backgrounds, and we give them a lot of flexibility to explore which areas are going to be their areas of passion.
Yeah.
And it works very well. Sometimes people, like during the onboarding process here at Develop Element, sometimes people are a little confused and a little insecure the first few weeks, or maybe even a month or two, because they're like, okay, so what's my role here? I don't have a very defined role. And what are my capabilities? And the funny thing is, by having that kind of exploratory process, people identify skill sets that they didn't imagine they had. We have people editing videos that had never edited videos in their lives. We have people editing manuals that have never done anything like it in their lives. We have people working on websites that have no professional background on website building websites. We have people doing all kinds of things they never imagined possible. And as a result, they end up feeling great about themselves. And they're like, whoa, thank you for letting me explore this. Thank you for letting me like develop new skill sets.
Yeah.
Thank you for having that patience and investing time and energy and helping us grow and such. But yes, there's that period of insecurity, but generally speaking, once they kind of find their spot, it's amazing.
Yeah.
And I mean, we do it here at Develop Element, but if you want a kind of more famous case, at Google, 20% of the time, I don't know if they still do it, but for many years, they used to have 20% of their staff's time allocated to projects that they each wanted to pursue without needing managerial approval. And that inspired a lot of innovation, a lot of amazing features, a lot of amazing tools, a lot of amazing products that have come out of Google, have come out of that 20%. I believe even Gmail, there was a lot of resistance and a lot of people against that idea that were like, no, we're a search engine, we're not an email provider. But then someone took it upon themselves to kind of develop something new and fresh and better than the the status quo, the general standard. And then it became one of the biggest features at Google. And a lot of different features and products that we consider essential Google products have come out of that period, because it's removing red tape. And removing red tape is something essential, whether it be in terms of business or family dynamics, or even in relationships. If people feel empowered to explore things, develop things, if they feel that they can effectively resolve problems, they're going to solve more problems than if they feel that there's a very long bureaucratic process, or a lot of resistance, or a lot of personal insecurities, or if they feel that their ideas are shut down instantly. Because sometimes by wanting to do quality control, it's very the desire to control the quality sometimes takes us to be overly critical of new ideas. And that can be in business, that can be in relationships, that can be in family dynamics. But we have to challenge ourselves to have a very positive spirit when someone shares a new idea, even if it's a bad idea from your perspective, even if it's an underdeveloped idea. And we have to understand extroverts think out loud, so they're going to share a bunch of crazy ideas, underdeveloped, that they're not married to, they're not that committed to. They just are sharing it as a, brainstorming process.
Yeah.
Whereas introverts are very married, they're very attached, they're very committed to their ideas because they spend a lot of time, energy, effort in developing them, testing them, verifying them, and they feel that they're only going to have the confidence generally to share an idea once it's developed.
Mm-hmm.
So they think that other personalities do the same, and they don't. So that's something we have to understand too, so that introverts don't shut down extroverts' ideas right away, and also vice versa. Sometimes extroverts maybe think that introverts' ideas maybe are too strict or too rigid, and there are many different factors, right? But we don't want to shut people down.
Yeah, exactly, because a lot of times people feel trapped. They feel like they're not given any creative room to explore. Mm-hmm. And it's because exactly that. We get protective of a project, we get protective of people, we get protective of a situation, and somebody delivers an idea. Maybe it's underdeveloped, maybe they're speaking with different language than us, maybe they have a different personality than us, maybe they're not communicating it in the way that we understand. And immediately we shut it down. We say, no, that's not possible. And we have to allow a certain period of going, okay, tell me more, or how would that work? Exploring the idea a little bit more, going back and forth with ideas, developing it a little bit more, asking the questions you need to understand where they're coming from and what they want to achieve before you shut an idea down.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at a lot of very successful, famous entrepreneurs or business owners or whatever word you want to use, if you look at Richard Branson, he basically has this idea and this mission of almost saying yes to anything. Mm-hmm. Having such a strong can-do attitude that he says yes and let's do it. What's his phrase? Is it screw it, let's do it? Or screw it, let's do it. And he has that mentality. And if you look at the Virgin brand, the amount of different things that Virgin does. I mean, from air travel to space exploration to record label to telecom to, so many different areas, right? Obviously, his personality, he has a certain extroverted side and he gets excited about new ideas. And obviously, we all have different areas of that work for us. There are entrepreneurs that have, more of a one idea, one focus and do that well, and that's great too. But just look at the success that certain entrepreneurs that have that mentality of, yes, let's do it, how that can work very well. Mm-hmm. And how, if you look at Richard Branson, he's had a lot of failures. A lot of his ideas haven't worked. A lot of the projects haven't worked. But the cool thing is, the ones that have worked have been able to not just pay for the ones that haven't worked. They've been so super successful. It's been great. And that happens with investors too. If you look at VCs, if you look at incubators, if you look at angel investors, you look at all these types of different business development and investment solutions and groups and individuals out there, they have a portfolio and they understand that maybe 10% of their portfolio is going to make the majority of the money, and maybe 90% of their portfolio is going to maybe fail, and they understand that, and they take those risks, right? Mm-hmm. So when it comes to ideas, we have to be willing to take risks. If we don't take risks, we don't innovate. Yeah. And there are many, many companies in history that we can look at that were the greatest, biggest companies in their industry that no longer exist because they stopped innovating. Yeah. They stopped taking risks. Yeah. So sometimes, yes, some companies take so many risks, and we look at products and things that come out, it's like, what? What's that? But, it's generally a good thing to take risks. So whether it's relationships, whether it's business, whatever it is, don't shut down ideas prematurely. Yeah. And don't make people feel wrong for sharing ideas. Mm-hmm. Because what happens is people get afraid of sharing ideas. And we've seen that even here at the office with certain individuals that felt that their ideas were not valued, that they weren't received well, that the response was maybe too critical. And then for a period, they had a hard time sharing ideas because of the resistance. And finding that balance of, being able to critique and explore ideas, but doing it in a way that people don't feel crushed is a very important thing, right?
Yeah.
So yes, we want to be able to have dialogues about quality control. We want to have dialogues about improving things, and this, and whether it be a relationship, like how do we improve the relationship? How do we improve, let's say, our sex life? How do we improve our communication? How do we make our each other feel better in a romantic relationship? Or whether it be in business, how do we fix this problem? How do we implement new ideas? How do we implement new solutions? We have to have those conversations where people feel that they can express themselves without being shut down.
Yeah, and a great way of doing that is sort of proposing hypothetical situations.
Yeah.
Like, oh, cool, how about if we're in this situation? How would that work out? Or what if we try something like this? How would that play out? How would that work for you? Suggesting things in that way so that people, A, don't take it as a personal attack, B, don't feel pressured to do everything you say the way you say it, and C, kind of get people out of whatever headspace they're already in. Because usually when we're developing an idea, whether it's something we want to do in a relationship or business or whatever, we have a certain field of view that we're looking at and that we're focusing at. And a different person has a different perspective.
Correct.
They have different background. They have different experiences. They have had different failures. They've had different successes. They can come with a different point of view and say, hey, what about this situation?
Their context is totally different. And that's one thing that we talk a lot about here in Develop Beyond, that we all have different contexts.
Yeah.
And when we talk about context, it's everything from experiences, goals, personality, situations, insecurities, challenges. We all are in different situations. Even when we're working within the same project, we all bring different things to the table, both ideas and good things, but also challenges, insecurities, goals, and such. So when we are in this process of having different contexts, we have to be humble enough, we have to be empathetic enough, we have to be curious enough to try to understand the other people's contexts and communicate our context enough so that we don't resort to personal attacks, so that it remains a collaborative process. And the reason why we're talking about this, the topic is conflict resolution. And I can imagine some people are like, okay, we're talking about conflict resolution. Why are we talking about developing ideas, having meetings, having discussions and conversations about these things? Because part of conflict resolution is understanding that we can prevent unnecessary conflicts, we can resolve conflicts much faster, and we have to take responsibility. And a lot of the conflicts we have in our lives are because we don't respect other people's personalities, other people's goals, other people's contexts, and that's a big problem. And we get defensive or forceful, or we get overly critical, and we have to be careful to not become overly critical either. So there are many things we can do to optimize our communication, our collaboration, our relationships, right? And I think one of the things that's very, very big, I mean, there's a study that was made there. I forget the finer details, but to kind of give you an idea, and you can look it up, there's a very big study that was made about relationships, and that showed that micro rejections or micro approvals could really make or break a relationship. And there are very famous psychologists. There's a very famous psychologist that can look at a married couple for 15 minutes or something like that, and with very high certainty conclude whether or not they're going to be married in a few years or not, and things like that. And there are a lot of different, there's a lot of research in this area, and a lot of it shows the importance of relationships, but shows also the importance of those micro approvals and the danger of micro rejections. Because if your partner comes with a lot of excitement home from work or home from their hobby, and you shut them down right away, or don't put enough attention, or don't celebrate them enough, even if you don't care about them. If you make them feel invalidated, you feel them make them feel unimportant, you make them feel that you don't care about their stuff, that deteriorates a relationship.
Yeah, and the thing is, you don't have to love everything that they do. You don't have to love everything they're excited about. But if they're coming to you and they're talking about something they're excited about, there's a very big difference between saying, huh, and so what? And being like, I'm so happy to see you so happy.
Yeah.
Like, there's a huge difference in that. So if you can express, even if you don't care that much about that subject they're talking about, express, I'm happy for you. I'm great. It's great that you're so excited. I love when you get so happy about something. Sharing those positive feelings and showing approval in little ways, that strengthens a relationship.
Yeah, micro approvals are important because it's more about the small things than the big things, you know? It's not about those big moments of super generosity or those moments of great celebration. Those are important too, but in the bigger picture, they're not as relevant. It's more the day-to-day stuff, the smaller things. So yes, in the heat of a big conflict, in the heat of a big thing, we're going to talk about how to resolve those. But a lot of the conflicts we have are because of these small moments.
Yeah.
Those everyday small little moments where we make someone feel validated or invalidated, make them feel included or feel excluded, make them feel intelligent or feel stupid, make them feel capable or incapable. And those micro moments are essential. And we really want a lot of micro validations. And it doesn't mean like going up to people every day and be like, oh, you're amazing, you're great, you're the best. Which, I mean, for some people it's great, for some people it's not that effective. I mean, depending on your personality and your context, some people will receive that in a great way. Some people will be like, oh, what do you want and whatever. But it's still a great practice, I mean, to show optimism. But in general, it's just listening to someone when they share something that they're excited about. Paying attention, being there, celebrating them, being like, oh, great job, I'm so excited. Or if someone comes home from a hobby that you really don't care about, and just being like, let's say your partner cares a lot about football, and you don't care about football, just cheering them on a little bit. That doesn't mean you have to join them at every single ball game every weekend, because that's not the kind of thing to yourself either, nor to them, because you're going to drain yourself. But every now and then joining them, great. Showing them that you're willing to go out of your comfort zone to join them every now and then is a positive thing. But it's those small moments.
Even just encouraging, being like, hey, like, isn't there a game? Go ahead, like, go to the game if you want to. You know, those little encouragements of, it's okay for you to pursue the things you're interested in. It's okay for you to be happy. It's okay for you to have your own life. Yeah,
because many times what happens in relationships is we try to guide people based on what works for us or what goals we have or what we see more value in. And what we end up doing is we end up inadvertently making people feel insignificant or make them feel invalidated.
Or like they have to change to
or make them
please
feel
you.
that they have to change to please you and things like that. And those things cause a lot of tension. Those cause a lot of drama, because what happens when we are doing things that fill us with energy, that regenerate us, that stimulate us, we're recharging our internal battery, we're feeling more confident, we're feeling happier, and we're going to be kinder in our relationships. But when we feel when we're doing things that we don't want to do, that are really out of our comfort zone in extended period of time, there's a difference between being adaptable and flexible in key moments and losing ourselves totally. So, but when we lose ourselves totally, trying to please everyone else and do things that really don't stimulate us in a positive way, our heart starts beating faster, our muscles start getting tenser, we start sweating more, we start becoming more impatient, less kind, less generous, more dramatic, more conflict prone, and things start getting very tense, right? So in the conversation of conflict resolution, we have to discuss how can we make people feel more confident, both ourselves, starting with ourselves, and then with others. Because let's face it, the more controlling we are of other people, the more insecure we are.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, if we're insecure, we're going to control people. Think of it of a relationship, like a romantic relationship. The more insecure you are, the more jealous and controlling you're going to be.
Yeah.
The more confident you are about yourself and your own value, the more liberties you're going to give your partner.
Yeah.
The more you're going to empower your partner, the more you're going to trust your partner, because it starts with trusting yourself, trusting your value.
Yeah.
Right? And if you trust your value, you trust your bond, you're not going to be jealous, you're not going to be controlling, you're not going to be dramatic, you're not going to create a bunch of drama to receive attention. You're going to be able to have mature dialogues, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're feeling insecure, there's going to be a lot of bullshit in your relationship. Let's face it. So we have to explore those things.
Yeah, and another note to just be aware of is the more controlling we are of people, the more we also feed their insecurities.
Yes.
And that's a big thing to remember, and because especially if we're in a leadership position, if we're a teacher, a parent, a boss, there is that tendency to want to guide people a little bit too much. And if we don't let them have wiggle room, if we don't let them explore things, if we don't let them achieve things based on their own ideas, based on their own struggles, based on their own processes, they're not going to develop that much confidence.
Yeah, and sorry, did you finish?
Go ahead.
I just wanted to add to that. As someone who cares a lot about helping people, protecting people, uplifting people, including people, all those sort of things. I mean, my combination of personalities really is a cocktail of really wanting to help and support people. And what happens sometimes is by helping them too much, maybe from my perspective and my ways, when I might be cutting the wings of certain individuals.
Yeah.
And I saw that before I had the level of awareness, consciousness, context, understanding about personality psychology and all that. I saw that before all of this would develop element. What happened a lot is I was the one in the family that would help and protect and support everyone with every single thing. I would drive between 3 different cities, sometimes 8 hours, 3 times a week, just to kind of help my grandfather or my father go to the bank or the supermarket, or help with every little thing I could, fixing computers, fixing the TV. I mean, whatever I could help with, right? Sometimes small things, sometimes big things. But they became so dependent of me that all these older generations in my family, some ended up depending on me for everything. All of a sudden, I was the one that had to do many basic things, from paying their bills to doing supermarket shopping, to doing banking, to doing all these sort of things. And what I saw happen during that period is suddenly certain family members of mine, they ended up depending on me a lot, and they were very grateful, and I liked being supportive. It helped me feel great about myself. It was a confidence boost knowing that I could fix so many problems. But at the same time, I saw their lives become less and less interesting.
Yeah.
I saw them become more and more complacent. I saw them become more and more dependent. And that was a moment where I realized that's not healthy either.
Yeah.
You know, one thing is supporting people, and another thing is making people feel become dependent or generating codependencies.
Yeah.
And a lot of relationships actually are not relationships based on love or gratitude or a very strong special bond. Many relationships are emotional dependency.
Yeah. And
we have to understand that there is that difference. And it's not about invalidating your relationship or anyone's relationships. And there's room for every type of relationship in this world. But just be aware that sometimes we're with people that may drain us, where we might have a lot of conflict. But we're there because we feel an emotional dependency.
Yeah.
We feel that without them, we're nothing. Without them, we are incapable. Without them. And if you feel that way, that's not an ideal situation, right?
Yeah.
Because ideally, relationships about being stronger together, being greater than the sum of all parts, not feeling less by one person feeling less and one person feeling more. No, it's about uplifting everyone. And taking this back to the conversation of conflict resolution, trying to maintain the thread here, it's very important that we let people fail, we let people explore their capabilities, we let people surprise themselves. Because when we let that process happen, people end up being surprised about their capabilities and they feel more confident. And confidence and internal battery are two very important things to reducing conflicts, as we've said throughout the program and throughout every program. I think we talk a lot about these concepts. And one thing that again, when it comes to letting people fail, it's often about our own confidence. For example, let's talk about personal development for a second. I think one of the biggest compliments, remember the compliment you gave me in Japan about how developed development is designed?
Yeah. One thing that really I personally loved about how developed development works is that it's designed to be obsolete, in the sense that you learn a few things, and then you have those skills that you can keep carrying on into your life. You don't become dependent on developed development. There are a lot of things in personal development that unfortunately, they help you just enough for you to feel better, but they don't empower you enough that you can leave them and do anything you want. And you have to keep going back. And there's that sort of feeling, I'm happy when I'm here, but I'm not happy with my actual real life. And developed development is designed to know, like, we want you to be happy with your actual real life.
Yeah, and that when she gave me that compliment and she brought that awareness to me, I was like, whoa, that's powerful, you know? And to get to that point requires certain confidence, right?
Yeah.
Because being able to set people free, being able to empower people fully, being able to have that feeling of everything is going to be okay no matter what, you know, you get there through confidence, right?
Yeah.
In developed development, we have enough confidence in our product, in our ethics, in our values, in our goals, in our mission, that we don't generate anything that is dependency creating. We understand that our purpose here is to help you guys have a better life and have better relationships and more ease, but we don't want you to come back all the time due to dependency. You're welcome to come back and digest our content, both paid or free. We try to be very generous with the content. I mean, this is a free program. But we have enough confidence to know that things are going to be okay. If we help you even in a short stint, it's going to make a difference in your life.
Yeah. And
you don't need to come back for more all the time. And also us as a business will keep going even if you don't come back. That's having confidence.
Yeah.
And if you look at relationships, having the confidence to let your girlfriend or boyfriend or partner certain freedoms, knowing that you have enough value, enough to contribute to the relationship, that even providing them certain freedoms and not micromanaging them, not spying on them, not controlling them, they're going to come back to you because you provide enough value to the relationship. If you don't have the confidence, you're going to be controlling them, limiting them, and it's going to be an indicator of your insecurities, right? So it's so important to work on your insecurities and work on your patience and flexibility by recharging yourself, because that way you're going to have fewer conflicts, because people, all the parties involved in the situation are going to feel much more confident, happier, empowered, taken into consideration, included. And that changes everything, because I think most conflicts come from people feeling excluded, feeling invalidated, feeling unheard, feeling inadequate, feeling that they have to force things because people aren't listening, aren't understanding. And, you know, that's step one, but we can't get stuck there. There's also, another step. One thing is having enough confidence. One thing is having enough mental clarity and being in a regenerated state. But another thing is being able to communicate in a way that other people can receive. Yeah. So if we are communicating our ideas, our values, our priorities from our own context, our own personality, our own way of seeing things, we're not going to provide enough value for our arguments or our ideas. But if we take into consideration the other person or the other people, we can add more value to our ideas or our arguments. So to give an example, my sister being more introverted, being more logical structured, if I present an idea, it has to be a little bit more developed for her to see full value in it. If I throw out an idea that doesn't provide enough context, enough logic for her, she might panic. For example, yesterday, I presented a new idea that we had, that some of us here in the team had discussed, and we didn't provide enough context, we didn't provide enough information, and she almost had a heart attack. It was like, whoa, what happened here?
It was, to me, out of the blue, because I wasn't there for the discussion where the idea was developed. So suddenly this idea is coming at me out of the blue, and I'm like, hold on a minute, we have all these things going on, and now you want to do this? So I had to, also there was sort of a certain level of personal responsibility in that moment of asking, okay, hold on, explain to me a bit more. Give me more information, give me more context. Because I could have just freaked out. And certainly before Develop Your Element, I would have had much more of an instinct of things are chaos, things are out of control, I don't know what's happening, and I wouldn't know how to handle it. But being able to say, hold on, give me a little bit more information. How did this come up? What's the long-term vision? When are we thinking of implementing this? So on. That helped me. But whichever side you're on, being able to ask the questions you need for you to understand the other person's context, and also being able to give the information the other person needs to have the right context is very important.
No, we've seen that time and time again here in the business, where a lot of the conflicts stem from someone presenting it based on the context they have, based on their way of seeing things, based on their values, based on their order of importance of things. And then another person has a different order and structure and a different order of importance, a different context, different priorities in that moment. And then they go, holy shit, what's going on here? What's going on? No. Why are you doing this when this is more important right now? This is urgent. Why are you getting distracted with that? And whoa, what's going on? Right? And we see that time and time again when an idea is not presented with enough context. And when someone maybe might have missed a meeting, and then they don't have the full context, and it's like, holy shit, what's going on here? And in those moments, I've seen when people don't take the time to contextualize things and explain their process, their context, and try to understand the context of the other person, it ends up being hours of useless discussion. But when the conversation is, okay, let me just give you a little bit of context, let me make sure that you understand why we came to this idea, why we're developing this idea, and also for you to understand what the timeline is and what the priority level is, because you right now think that this might be the highest priority thing, the most urgent thing, in our perspective, when it's not, right? So it's, okay, so this is a thing that we want to do with this level of, with this timeline, we want to do it in this way. And the context is that we saw this, we identified this, we got this feedback, we explored this possibility, we saw this area of opportunity, so we're developing it as an idea, and it will not be launched until this point, so there's still plenty of time, so there's no reason to stress. And having a conversation like that helps a lot to reduce defensiveness and you know, resistance to a new idea.
No, and even if the idea doesn't work, even if after understanding the context you identify that it's not the best idea, when you have that context, you can propose better alternatives. You can say, oh, okay, that's the issue you want to resolve. How about this other possibility? How about this other way of handling it? Which is very different from straight up saying no to an idea without context, and then the problem never gets solved.
No, and another thing, I mean, pick your words wisely, because if you go but and no, that's not possible, or have you thought of this? Depending on how you do it, but it's a combination of word choice and intensity, because the same words with different intensities can change a lot. I mean, you guys know that I think it's 7% of communication is actually verbal. Most of it is body language, is intensity, tone of voice, things like that. I mean, I can give the best compliment, but if I go, you're the best, like if I go super intense, and sorry for the audio there, that's not received. I can be saying the nicest things ever, but if my body language and my intensity does not project that, it's not going to be received well. And you can say something that is considered an insult, but you can say it in a way that's received in a positive way. Like in a flirtatious setting, if you go, oh, you're my favorite little psychopath, like in the right context, in the right environment, in the right relationship, you can do something that sounds like an insult and make it sound like a compliment. I mean, you can use it as banter.
Yeah.
So just understand that it's not just about the words you choose, but it's also about body language and tone of voice.
Yeah.
Because that changes the meaning and it changes how it's received.
Yeah.
Big time. So be aware of that, because there are also people who are not very aware of their body language and the tone of voice, and that people think they're upset and angry all the time when they really are not. They're just not aware of their body language and intensity. I mean, we have a person on the team who sometimes we think is upset, we think is stressed, and this person is looking at me like, not true. And then he says, I'm actually not upset. I'm not. It's just. I maybe didn't take into account my body language or whatever.
No, and sometimes he's just playing around. Like sometimes it's just like playful banter, and he'll start like giving feedback that he thinks is playing with the situation and joking around and sort of an extended metaphor. Yeah. But he'll get so into it that sometimes it does come across like he's genuinely upset.
A certain way.
Yeah, like he'll seem genuinely rigid and upset, and I'm like, and sometimes I have to translate the situation because we have different languages on the team, and I'm like kind of scared. And then eventually he'll look at me and be like, "Oh, did I seem really angry? I was not that angry."
Yeah. So I just wanted to add that to the conversation as well, because it's not just about what you say, but how you say it, right? And that's a big thing. So going back to like resolving conflict in a meeting or in an idea process or conflicting ideas. We want to understand the context of the other person. We want to communicate our context. We want to connect with each other. We want to have a collaborative process. And we need to be not too married to our ideas. Yeah. So we have to have the flexibility to be agile, to be able to work with change, to work with new ideas. And we also have to understand that not every idea has to be launched, for example, or not every idea that is explored has to be implemented, let's say, in a relationship. There's a difference between exploring something and launching something. Yeah. And I mean, in the business world, every company has money for research and development. And they develop a lot of products that they don't launch. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean you shouldn't develop them and explore them. You should take that time and explore things. And then the things that work, great, launch them. The things that don't launch them. When it comes to relationships, the ideas that we can come to a consensus on, that we can come on this, get on the same page about, and we find a way that works for everyone, let's implement it in the relationship. The dynamics that might make one person feel invalidated and one person feel great, maybe let's not implement that. Or maybe let's limit it to one time a year. I actually was watching a podcast with the Smiths family, Will Smith, Willow Smith, the three generations of Smith women, what she called Jada Pinkett Smith and her mother, they were having a very raw conversation about relationships, and they talked about how in their relationship they actually had to destroy their relationship and reconstruct the relationship, and eliminating expectations from the other person, and also being flexible in some moments, but not losing themselves trying to please the other person. Mm-hmm. Because what happened, and with the words of development, Will Smith is a very, very, very extroverted person who wants to travel a lot, who really needs public approval, and public perception is very important for him. He never wants to go to the same place twice. He wants adventure travel. He wants constant travel, and anywhere in the world can be his home. He does not need a very stable home. He just likes the whole world is his home. And Jada Pinkett Smith said she likes tradition. She likes the home life. For her, the most important is family life. And for her, traveling so much is not that positive. It's more stressful. And when they started having real conversations about what each of them really wanted and not adapting themselves totally to the other person, they set each other free. Mm-hmm. And they basically were like, what they said is, the moment they eliminated deal breakers from their relationship, the moment that they empowered each other enough and trusted in each other enough, is when their relationship started to flourish.
Yeah.
And that requires a lot of confidence.
Yeah.
A lot of confidence. And a lot of self-awareness, a lot of introspection. And I think they also said that they had to kind of separate themselves for a year or two to really find themselves and find what's important for them and then reconnect. And they said that for them, divorce was not an option. They didn't want a divorce. They did have a very strong bond. They did love each other very passionately. They did consider themselves each other best friends. And there was a lot of great stuff there. But there was a lot of stuff that wasn't working. And in their conversation, it was very beautiful. They really explored a lot of things. And they said, okay, so now what we do is once a year for 1 week or for 10 days, I forget exactly the number, but approximately in that range, they would go travel together to adventure tourism, something high stimulus for Will Smith. And once a year, they would do the traditional stuff during Christmas with the same routine, the same music, the same conversations, the same everything, which for Will Smith is very stressful, but for Jada is very nice. It's that tradition that she likes. And they adapt to the other person, not the whole year, but during key moments that are important for the other person as an act of generosity.
Yeah.
And that's something that we talk about in development is adapt in moments of generosity, return to your base, value the differences, trust yourself enough and your bond enough to allow your partner to seek the activities that recharge them, allow yourself the activities that recharge you, and express it very openly. Don't try to be something you're not, because we talk about in relationships, what happens when you adapt yourself too much?
You get drained. You really do. You get to the point where you're not exploring the things you're interested in. You're not exploring the things that give you energy, that give you motivation, that give you that drive to be happy. So if you lose yourself completely in a relationship, what's going to happen? There are going to be more conflicts. Sometimes by trying to avoid conflicts, we create more conflicts. And I don't know this very much from personal experience, because I am the type that likes to avoid conflicts. I like to avoid tension. I like to avoid stress. I like to avoid intensity. And I realized so many of my problems were because of that. Yeah. It was because I would just avoid things, not deal with them, and then they would keep growing and growing and festering, and it would be like a tiny thing to begin with, but I would want to do it perfectly and not have any problems, so I would avoid it until it became a big issue.
No, one fun fact about my sister is sometimes, especially before development, she would hold on to things that maybe I said or someone said 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and that became a very significant moment for her. And maybe I didn't communicate very clearly and I made mistakes in my communication, but she perceived something very different from what I actually felt or what I thought. And then she would feel rejected for years. And then one day she told me, that thing you told me that one time and that moment, that really stuck with me. And to this day that affects me. I'm like, what? Okay, so maybe in that moment I did react in a suboptimal way, but it's because I didn't know I had to organize my thoughts and process things and think about things, and I maybe it was a process for me as well. But that was by no means a rejection or me thinking less of you or anything like that. And but she bundled that up for years, and had she asked for clarification in any moment during that time, or expressed how she felt in any moment during that time, I could have alleviated a lot of stress, a lot of tension, a lot of feeling of just a lot of bad stuff, and because she held on to it for all that time. Yeah. And I mean, I've seen that both in terms of our family dynamic, but also in the business. How many times are the people that feel insecure about something, but they don't express it? Yeah. And then it becomes a conflict, and a long time goes by and we don't understand why a person suddenly is being less productive and maybe less inspired. And it's like, it's an insecurity that stems from something that needed to be clarified, and we have a conversation and everything gets solved. Yeah. And now we've made it a habit in the business to just have meetings where we sit down and we talk about how to optimize things, and we make everyone feel included, make everyone feel heard, and we try to understand everyone's values and priorities and stressors, and try to kind of proactively deal with things so that people don't bundle things up, because I mean, it happens very frequently that people bundle things up.
Yeah, and it's okay to take a little bit of time to process, because sometimes, yes, there's a conflict, or you feel like you've been rejected by somebody, and you need a little bit of time to sort of reprocess and recalculate the situation before having a conversation to clarify it. But if that is lasting a year, 2 years, 5 years, then you're avoiding the issue, and that's very different. Yes. So you can take a little bit of time, calm down, remind yourself, okay, people's first reaction isn't always the best reflection of how they feel.
Exactly.
Because sometimes people are just caught off guard. Sometimes people just don't have the context. Sometimes people are just surprised and they don't react in the ideal way. So reminding yourself of that, taking a little bit of time, and then reapproaching can be very, very helpful.
That's very important, because I've noticed both in family dynamics, in our sibling relationship, or whatever you want to call it, as well as in the business with team members, I've seen many times where someone feels insecure about something, and what they really need is just a bit of validation. And without having the knowledge and context, I might not provide that automatically. And when they've kind of expressed that need for validation, or expressed need for clarification, I've been able to provide it in a very swift way, very clear way, and then they've gotten unstuck very quickly. I'll give you an example here in the business. There's one of a very essential team member that there was a problem. There's a very high stressful period in the business where we had a lot of travel, a lot of events, and certain mistakes were made that he had some involvement in, and it created a big moment of tension. It created a big moment of insecurity, and it sparked a lot of other insecurities about abilities and basically that individual ended up going through a kind of process of a mental process that became very extended, and for several days this individual was kind of locked in his room, having to process a lot of different things, and a lot of it was just insecurities and things that by having a conversation we could make that individual see their value, their contributions, and suddenly a lot of that weight, a lot of that stress, a lot of that tension just disappeared by having one conversation. And now we've learned what we just need to do is make sure that everyone feels heard all the time, that we're constantly making sure that we're there for them, and giving compliments to people that come across as not needing compliments. That's a big thing too. There are certain people, like, for example, in this Will Smith thing, he said that he was like a little kid needing mommy's approval, wanting Jada Pinkett Smith to always celebrate Will Smith's achievements. And when she stopped celebrating them, he shut down. And we've seen that as well in our dynamic, that me being an extrovert, being more outgoing, showing more social confidence. What did you think?
I thought you had it all under control. I really thought, growing up, I had a lot of social insecurities. Already to begin with, I was introverted, so there's that. But I also saw Jannik shining, always having friends. Wherever he went, he'd be, whether it was with grown-ups or with kids, he was like a leader. He would shine. And I remember seeing them being like, there's no way I can do that, right? So I wouldn't give you compliments because I thought, you're already so confident, kind of bordering on cocky, maybe passing the border of cocky. And I thought, if I give him compliments, they're going to go to his head, and he's going to go even more crazy, even more cocky, even more out there. And what I've realized now is no, when you're really crossing that border of trying too much to prove that you're confident is when you need the compliments the most.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very important point. there's certain people of certain personalities that come across that they have everything under control. But inside, they can be super insecure.
Yeah.
They can be super, super vulnerable. And sometimes we dismiss that. And we end up giving more attention to people that maybe cause more drama, express themselves more emotionally. And sometimes those people, sometimes it's real. And sometimes they're just doing it because they've learned to manipulate in that way. And sometimes the people that show less need for approval and less need for affection are the ones that need it the most.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example, a sad example, but an example that can will connect a lot of dots for you guys. You guys remember Robin Williams?
Yeah.
And that he committed suicide because of depression.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the world, that came as a shock for a lot of the world, because
Yeah.
a lot of us saw him as this bright, shining star that filled every room with joy and happiness.
Yeah.
And I have come to learn with time and studying personality psychology that sometimes the most charismatic people can be the most insecure people.
Yeah.
And this is where we have to understand that there are many different things that come into play. One thing that we talk a lot about is there's a difference between introversion and shyness.
Mm-hmm.
Introversion is the need for lower social stimulus. Shyness is a fear of judgment and fear of rejection.
Yeah.
I'm an extrovert. An ambivert mixed with an extrovert. I'm not the most extroverted person in the world, but I am very extroverted, especially compared to you. And yes, in some environments I shine. But in some environments, I become a small little ball of insecurities. In my romantic life, for many years, I had many insecurities. I had fear of rejection. Having been I'm a person who has traveled a lot, has changed countries a lot. I've gone to schools in many different countries. I've lived in many different countries. I've always been the outsider. I jumped a year in school, so I was always the youngest kid. So I was the small little foreigner kid who was the outsider always. So that helped me develop social skills to integrate fast in new countries, new places, and it helped me a lot with social abilities, but it also instilled certain insecurities because I always felt like the outsider.
Yeah.
And I always felt like the outsider to such a degree that I actually felt that I was a burden to people.
Mm-hmm.
And people from the outside thought I was this charismatic, very confident guy. And in some environments I was. But when it came to dating, also there was the factor of, now we have the Me Too movement, but for many years we had the precursor of the Me Too movement, with women saying a lot of things about men, generalizing certain things. And this is where one size fits all is a problem. And one of the reasons why in developed development we don't talk about one size fits all. I heard all this feedback about women's traumas with actions of men, that I went to a degree of becoming paralyzed, and I did not want to express any interest, any desire, any sexual or romantic interest, and I rejected myself all the time, and I thought I would be a burden. I thought anything would be an offense, that no one would want to be with me. And I've learned since then that actually women scientifically have higher sex drives than men. I've learned that women and men, and doesn't matter gender, when a person communicates interest in the right way, it will be perceived as a compliment instead as an offense. And there are many different things, right? But for me, I didn't have all that context. I didn't have all those nuances, right? So I thought all types of masculinity were a problem. I didn't understand that there was ways of, having, I didn't know how to be a man in a world where I felt that being a man, I would get rejected, right? And this is a problem where different people need to hear different things, right? So there are men that need to hear all these things from the Me Too movement, that need to hear all these things about respect and consent and all these sort of things. There are people that need all this really drilled into them because they maybe weren't raised with the same values. They maybe don't have the same emotional intelligence.
Yeah, a lot of men, unfortunately, have been taught that you have to go get it and don't take no for an answer. And that is a problem that has to be addressed. That is a problem that has to be addressed. But there are a lot of other guys that they instinctively take no for an answer, and then they get drilled with that same advice.
Yeah.
And they internalize all the advice that was meant for other people.
Exactly.
I think a lot of us have had that experience where maybe someone, like when we're kids and somebody else in the class misbehaves and they get scolded and we feel bad for it. People that exist of every gender. So we do have to give context.
Exactly.
It's one thing to address toxic masculinity, but we also have to teach what wholesome masculinity looks like and is like.
And this conversation, I mean, to bring it back to conflict resolution, because we want to maintain that thread, is we have to understand that there are people who, come across as confident but might be very insecure. That there are people who need more validation. And there are people, for example, me, that I show a lot of confidence. And in some environments, I have a lot of confidence. But in some areas, I need a lot of extra approval, a lot of extra consent, extra approval, extra validation in the areas where I'm more insecure, right? So that's really important. But the other thing is understanding when we talk about providing feedback and having dialogues, we have to be careful with one size fits all, because exactly something that might help someone become more emotionally intelligent, more kind, more compassionate, more considerate, more respectful, might make another person reject themselves, shut down, and whatever. When we talk about the context of personality psychology, if you tell an extrovert to speed up and you tell an introvert to speed up, it's two totally different things. If you tell an introvert to slow down and an extrovert to slow down, it's two totally different things. Yeah. We need different advice in different situations.
Yeah.
I've seen it in sales, for example.
Yeah.
I used to work for a company that said, slow down the sale so that you can ask more questions, give more context. And it was great advice for certain people. For some extroverts, they needed to slow down to make sure that they provided the right product, asked the right questions. But for some introverts that already had a very slow process, maybe they needed to hear speed up.
Yeah.
For some people, they need to hear go get it. For some people, they need to hear
hold on a minute.
Hold on a minute. We all need to hear different things.
Yeah.
And that's very important, because if we don't have the context of advice and feedback and education, because let's face it, a lot of this is education. If it's not contextualized, we have people that will receive that information and they will be implemented in a very non-kind way.
Yeah.
Right? And it will be received in a way that will not achieve what may be the purpose of certain, let's say, movements, or let's say goals, or let's say communications, or let's say mentorship, or, we have to be very careful. And when it comes to conflict resolution, we can reduce a lot of conflict by contextualizing our advice.
Yeah.
By uplifting people that already come across as confident. Because as my sister said, when I come across as more arrogant and forceful is when I'm most insecure.
Yeah.
When I receive compliments, support, emotional support, mental support, whatever, I'm much more humble because I have much more real confidence, right?
Yeah.
And there's a difference between humility and false modesty. I don't want anyone to be falsely modest. I'm all for celebrating achievements, but there's a difference. But there's a very small line between arrogance and confidence that inspires people. Mm-hmm. There's a very small fine line between many different things, character traits, where if you use it in one way, it can be very positive, or one way it can be very negative. There's a very fine line between using emotions to uplift people, make a special bond, and creating unnecessary drama that makes people feel invalidated, right? Mm-hmm. So those little fine lines are important.
Yeah.
And by regenerating people, by having healthy dialogue, by contextualizing things, we're going to have much fewer disagreements, much less resistance, much less counterproductive feedback. I'll give you another example of something that happened to paint the picture. I'm a person who naturally is very driven, and I've received a lot of feedback and read a lot of books about entrepreneurship that told me to be even more driven, and it ended up being very unhealthy for me. So I actually needed to hear remember to take breaks, remember to breathe, remember to recharge your battery. And those are things that I didn't receive in the moment that I needed it. And now, I mean, in development, I'm going to talk about it a lot. And that's another thing. Let people recharge the battery. Let people disconnect. Don't force things. If things are not flowing, don't force it.
Yeah.
Disconnect and get back to it in a more regenerated state.
Yeah.
Those things are essential.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, this topic is we can go so many directions, and I actually don't think it's a topic we can cover in one episode, because the more we talk, and I mean the purpose of a podcast is kind of letting things flow a little bit, having a topic to cover, but also letting things flow as things get brought up. And many things that we hadn't planned are coming up in this conversation, and many things that it's like, wow, you know, all these conflicts and all this drama and all these insecurities that have come up in different parts of our lives because we didn't contextualize, because we didn't understand different personalities, because we received the wrong advice that maybe it's what they needed to hear and not what I needed to hear, and things like that. And it's like, okay, now we do want to go into each personality. We want to go into how to recharge each personality, but I think that needs to be its own episode. Yeah. But I do want to do an episode where we really go in, how do you basically resolve a conflict very quickly with each personality. Yeah. We can do like an express one, for example, to give you an idea. With the different personalities, if you don't have the context, go on developyourman.com. You can get the very basic description of the elements, or watch the channel videos we have on this channel, or watch the different previous episodes. But in Develop Young, we talk about 6 different personalities: 2 extroverts, 2 ambiverts, 2 introverts. We have a progressive scale. Behind me, we have the electric, the most extroverted; the fiery, the second most extroverted; the aquatic, the third most extroverted, but actually more ambiverted, as in the middle point; then the earthly type, third most introverted, but ambiverted in the sense that it's a middle point as well; airy, the second most introverted; and then finally metallic, the most introverted. And they all have different kind of values and priorities. The electric, we associate them with fun, adventure, constant change, youthfulness. Fiery type, we associate them with productivity, impact, leadership, and status and maturity, influence. Aquatic types, we associate aquatic types with emotional, sentimental beings who seek strong connections with people, who really, when they're at a regenerative state, they really, I mean, they do a lot for their loved ones. They are very supportive of their loved ones. When they feel insecure, it's a little bit more dramatic and whatever, relevant to the context of conflict resolution. Then we have the earthly type, the nurturing, motherly type that take care of everyone, that want harmony, diplomacy, comfort for everyone. Airy type is the type that introverted, needs a lot of personal space, analyzes, senses, everything around them is processing a lot of information for them. They get overcharged with information very easily, but they're brilliant minds when they're at the regenerated state. But when they're in a drained, insecure state, they can become reclusive. And finally, the metallic type is very logical, structured, exact, precise, perfectionistic. Perfectionistic, not in the sense of insecurity, sometimes yes. Perfectionistic in the sense that they like to exactitude, they like precision, they like to perfect things. And they can be very critical, but it's not necessarily a personal thing. Many times it's just wanting to improve things, right? So just having given you that very quick recap, if you look at the electric types, the way you resolve a conflict with them is very different than the way you resolve a conflict with a metallic type. Yeah. With an electric type, you're probably going to go out on you can distract them, you can do different things to recharge them, make them feel a certain level of fun, and kind of get them to a better state of mind. Letting them move and get out and do certain things can give them this battery to come back and have a meeting where they're not as anxious and as stressed, right? Yeah. Whereas a metallic, you have to have a lot of precision, exactitude with your words. It has to be a very logical process. It has to be well thought out, very well analyzed. It's a different process. If you look at the fiery types, maybe giving them a compliment and making them feel special and making them feel productive, that might help get them back on track and focus more on problems instead of forcing things, right? Aquatic types, they make them feel special, make them feel that you're in it together, making them feel that this is something that's to deepen the relationship, to deepen the bond. That can help, right? For earthly type, making sure that it's not too intense, the language, making sure that there's a certain level of diplomacy, kindness, gratitude. Expressing gratitude for them is a very quick way to make them feel at peace, that things are flowing, because they want everyone to be happy. And if they feel that people are happy, then they are more able to get unstuck, right? And there are many things. I mean, we have a lot of advice and a lot of different things that we'll cover in a different episode. And then we have the airy type, giving them a bit of personal space, but making them feel included. Having dialogues that don't have high pressure, high intensity, are much more productive than forcing things in the moment, because that'll just make them shut down. And metallic types, giving them enough logical context, logical explanation, analysis, and doing it in a way that they don't feel panic, because sometimes what happens with them is because they analyze everything, structure everything. When they understand that other personalities aren't as married to certain ideas, they can have more peace, right? So there are many different things we can do with personality, psychology, and conflict resolution specifically. But I think today the most important part of the conversation was contextualize, take into account different personalities, take into account different goals, different situations. Different people need different advice. Everyone needs to feel micro validations and big validations and celebrations. Micro validate your team and your partners every day. Be careful with micro rejections and big rejections, because micro rejections, they pile up and they make people feel insignificant, defensive. And when people feel insignificant, defensive, that's when a lot of conflicts arise. Ask more questions than provide solutions. Focus on resolving the problem, not winning the argument, because if you focus on winning the argument, you're just going to drain each other. Things are not going to work. Also, pick your timing right, your body language right, your intensity right. So sometimes you want to fix the problem by waiting, recharging, distracting yourself, recollecting your thoughts, and then get back to resolving the problem in a moment where everyone is more at peace, in a better emotional state, mental state. And yes, be aware of how your body language and your tone of voice is perceived, because if you are communicating in a way that you are saying all the right words, but your body language and tone of voice say something different, you're going to make the other people feel bad. You know,
confused at best and attacked at worst.
And understand that we all have different goals, different values, and have enough confidence. If you work on your inner confidence, you will give people more freedom. You will let people fly. You won't cut their wings off. And by having more confidence in yourself, you will empower people more, and you'll have less conflict as well. So I think we've covered a lot of things in today's program that kind of open up the conversation for conflict resolution. But I definitely think there's a lot more that we will want to explore in future episodes. So do make sure to subscribe and ring the bell if you want to receive notifications on when we have new episodes. We do have episodes every week at the same time, 11 a.m. Central Time. And we always live stream them here on YouTube. And for those that cannot be here live, developbeyond.com/podcast. You will be able to both listen and hear it as well. And we are working on getting this podcast on several different platforms. And we'll announce it when we are on more platforms. But for now, developbeyond.com/podcast.
Yes.
Anything you want to add about conflict resolution before we wrap up?
Not really. I think we've covered a lot of great things. And it's an important conversation to have. Because exactly, we all have different instincts, and it's so easy to get attached to our own instincts. But if we look at our long-term goals, if we look at the long-term goals for the relationships that we have, the projects that we have, we can see that there are better ways of handling conflicts.
It's something that conflict resolution, I think, should be a big part of everyone's personal and professional development. And it's not just resolving the conflict in the moment. It's preventing them by recharging, by overcoming insecurities by being more empathetic, more inclusive, and there are many things, I mean, that we've already covered and I've already recapped, but I do challenge you to try to take all this stuff that we've talked about and implement it in your personal life, in your romantic life, in your family life, in your business, and you'll see there'll be less drama, there'll be less conflict, there'll be fewer insecurities, and there'll be more acts of generosity, there'll be more flexibility from the people around you. And really ask yourself, how can you be a source of regeneration and a source of a confidence boost for the people around you instead of trying to control and micromanage the people around you. So that covers everything for today. Thank you very much once again for joining us. And see you next time, next week, same time, same place.
See you there.
Have a good one.